go. Tonight our discussion with Todd Whitaker is what great educators do differently. But before we get started, Todd, we always take a few minutes to get to know our guests just a little bit better. So if you could take some time, just tell us a little bit about your story, tell us about your family, where you're born and raised, and most importantly, what or who inspired you to become an educator.
Gotcha. I was born in Concordia, Kansas, which is north central Kansas, right near the Iowa line, and I'm very excited about that. And then moved to St. Charles, Missouri, and grew up in St. Charles. And it's kind of funny. My dad used to always say, "Those who can do, and those who can't teach." And I realized he was almost right. What he meant to say was those who can teach, and those who can't go into some much less important line of work. And I've always kind of remembered that. And I went to the University of Missouri, and I applied at one college, and that was University of Missouri. I'd never been to campus, just showed up. And a true story, I went and I met with a counselor at summer welcome, and counselor met like a junior in college or a senior. And literally, I sat down with them, and they said, "What do you want to major in?" And I literally said, "What do you got?" And they said, "We need to narrow it down a little bit." And I said, "Okay, what's the easiest thing you have?" And they said, "Business." And I said, "What's the easiest area of business?" They said, "Marketing." And I became a business marketing major, and that's a true story. I graduated, miracle upon miracle, and went and started law school at University of Missouri. And I thought everybody in law school was there for the same reason I was: truth, justice, in the American way. But at least a few of my colleagues wanted to make weren't there for truth, justice. They wanted to make $300 an hour with a law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, which I'm pretty sure is an Iowa firm. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure it is. And anyhow, I knew that wasn't what I wanted as my peer group, truthfully. And I happened to be dating a girl whose dad was a high school basketball coach. And I got to see what an impact he had on the lives of all of the players. His wife also was an educator, and I got to see the difference they made. And so I quit law school and got into education, and that's exactly what happened. And I actually wanted to be originally an elementary teacher, and I had a degree. I quit law school. I went to the University of Missouri, and I said, "What do I need to do to become an elementary teacher?" And they said, "You have to take 76 more hours of classes." And I went to secondary, and I go, "What do I have to do?" And they said, "You have to take 69 more hours of classes." So I became a secondary teacher, and I became certified in math and business education, and then happened to teach in Keatsville and was a basketball coach. And truthfully, it's kind of funny. I taught on personality, and it turns out other people had lesson plans and stuff. But kids that I'd worked with that were easy, and I really liked working with them and all this, they'd be sent to the office, or they'd be out in the hallway every day. And I kept thinking, if these people can't manage these kids, I mean, there weren't anybody tough. And I really thought if I could do something to help improve the instruction and improve the skills of teachers in a school, potentially that would have more impact than I could have as a teacher. And I became a principal and basketball coach. I was varsity boys and varsity girls basketball coach in Hopkins, Missouri, and was a principal there, and then moved to Jefferson City and was there for 7 years, and met my wife, and had a chance to move to Indiana State, and we've been here for quite a while now. So that's kind of my little venture.
Great, Todd. Thank you. Hey, one of the things, when I listen to you speak, I can't help but think, I think I'd shared this story with you before, that the first time I heard you speak, I believe, was back in 1992. And I still remember that being there. I remember just how impressed I was with the things that you had to share.
Were we in the civics class together then, Jimmy?
No, not at that time. What I still remember about it is not only did you move me and inspire me in terms of wanting to be a better educator, but you also made me laugh a lot. I always remember that, and that has not changed over the years. So when I think about that, tell us a little bit about one of the first books I read that you wrote, What Great Teachers Do Differently, followed by What Great Principals Do Differently. What was the inspiration behind writing those books?
Gotcha. And it's really funny, and this is a true story. I don't read books. I don't read other people. I read true crime once in a while, and that's it. I don't read it. Somebody told me the other day I'm the only person they've ever known who's written more books than they've read, and they're pretty close to that in terms of the truth. It's really the strangest thing how you get started in this. When I was a principal in Jeff City, and my wife was a principal in Jeff City, and she went to the White House and met Bill Clinton and all this stuff, and Anyhow, we used to have visitors come to our school just constantly. Multiple visitors every day of the week would come to our school and see things we were doing. And instead of having grade cards, it's so weird to me. You know, this is 20 years or 20 plus years ago, and we did not have traditional grades in my school. We had 1,300 middle school kids, and 6 times a year the kids got one-page narratives in each of their classes. And it was a one-page narrative. Each teacher wrote about every student they had in the school. They had 120 kids each, and they wrote a one-page narrative 6 times a year instead of a grade card. And I assumed within 2 years, every school in the country would be doing this and doing other things. And I'm still amazed that every school isn't. I'm just stunned at that. Well, anyhow, one of the schools where I inherited was a school in Jefferson City, and the principal had been there for like 18 years. And the principal prior to him was nicknamed Froggy. And spray painted on the side of the building for 18 years was Froggy, S-U-C-K-S-S. And if you think that's bad, spray painted underneath it was No, I Don't. So I've always kind of remembered that. But that particular principal was the law ain't for sale no more. I mean, you know, he'd yell at kids, yell at teachers, humiliate and belittle, and I didn't believe in that. But what had happened was that had established such a tone in the school that that's the way the teachers treated the kids too. And I couldn't live with that, and I knew I had to do something. I was very blessed. At the end of my first year, my 5 worst teachers were gone, and the rest of the school voted unanimously to extend the school day by 20 minutes a day for no pay. And what it really shows is if you work with people correctly, you actually gain credibility. You don't lose credibility when you're dealing with challenging people. And my first book was actually dealing with difficult teachers because of that. And it was all just kind of a fluke. It was really a true story. I knew I wanted to present some. I was presented a lot when I was a principal, but I felt bad leaving my school. And I came here to Indiana, and I called the state executive director of the Principals Association, who's a different person than is there now, and I told him I'd like to present at the state principals conference, you know, just a concurrent session whenever. And he goes, I remember he goes, well, I don't know, we got some really good ones. He goes, we've got one on retirement that's always really popular. We've got one that's built around a golf outing. We've got whatever. And he goes, what do you want to present on? And I go, I didn't even think about it. And I go, I don't know, dealing with difficult teachers. And they said, okay. And I remember I presented my very first session here in Indiana. And they gave me the last session on the last day, which I understand there's no chance I'd be there. And I remember the main session ended like at 2:30, and then I was like started at 2:30. It's 2:40. There's not a single person in the room. And I thought apparently in Indiana they don't have any difficult teachers. But it turns out the general session went over. So when they came in, almost every single person from that session came, and I realized that we all have all these things in common. And I never want to write anything that doesn't seem timeless. And so I wrote Dealing with Difficult Teachers, and it became real popular. My second book was Motivating and Inspiring Teachers, then Dealing with Difficult Parents, and then I wrote What Great Principals Do Differently. And it's probably the closest thing I have to a core, you know, in terms of what it is that is principal. And to me, that's the thing that's closest as a core. And then principals wanted me to write a book for their teachers, so I wrote What Great Teachers Do Differently. And what really happens is, honestly, I'll read something that scares me to death because it's just wrong. In my opinion, almost everything on drop-in supervision's wrong. Almost everything on evaluation's wrong now. And it scares me that everybody doesn't see that. So I just have to, you know, it's like I say I have to vomit it out. But once I get it out, I don't need to think about it anymore. And it's just trying to help people do stuff. And the great people know this, but sometimes we get confused because what happens with great people is nobody else does it, so they think maybe they're wrong.
Todd, can you expand a little bit on what you just said in terms of what everything on evaluation today is wrong? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Let's just think of it this way. You know, the key to leadership is how do I deal with my high achievers? They're the only people that are going to move your school, and people who think it's somebody else for that they're just incorrect. And the challenge is how do I work with my high achievers? Think about this. If you do a 5-minute walkthrough, Jimmy, and you have to leave some kind of a evaluation, some kind of feedback, and I do a 5-minute walkthrough in my very best teacher, and I have a 15-item checklist, and they get 11 items out of 15, which is the world record. That best teacher looks at how many items when I walk through.
I'm going to say the 4 they didn't.
And you know what that great teacher wants? Me not come in the room anymore. And before I did that, the great teacher wanted me in the room every day. When I started as a principal, I'm 25. I literally do not know anything. And you know why I walked in classrooms every day? Because the good teachers liked it and the poor teachers didn't. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because of being sophisticated. The good teachers liked it and the poor teachers didn't. Anything good teachers like and poor teachers don't, I do as often as I possibly can. But what's funny is I'm not leaving them a note. I feel no obligation to do that. Instead, the next day I go, how do you get Kevin to pay attention in there? That's incredible. How do you do that? Tell me what you do to get the kids to be so engaged. I saw the kids were starting on their project. Would you mind letting me know when they're done with that? Because I'd love to come in and be able to see this. And what happens then is the good teachers like it and the poor teachers don't. But as soon as I start judging them, the good teachers don't like it, and the poor teachers don't like it either. And the other thing that's interesting, and I admire principals who can do this, I don't even want to go in classrooms if I have to judge you every single time I go in. I don't want to go in. It's exhausting. And I think that's so confusing. We try to mandate effectiveness, and it's impossible to mandate effectiveness. Think about this. The State Department tries to mandate effectiveness in all 50 states, and we think they're a joke. And if we try to do that as a school, we're doing the same thing that's happening to us that we think is completely inappropriate.
A few questions coming in. So Dan, Devin, you want to take a couple of those questions coming in?
Yeah, we'll go with one from Tim Schulte, who teaches in Iowa, and he had a question that said, how can a teacher change culture in a school where professional development is looked at as drudgery?
How can a teacher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically a teacher is what he asked.
It's sort of like, how could a student improve the classroom dynamic when the teacher's ineffective? But I think the first thing we need every teacher to do is be incredibly effective in their classroom. And then what they can do is they can look for other teachers who want to be incredibly effective. I wouldn't be near as concerned about changing the school if I'm an individual teacher as I would be concerned about finding someone else so that all of a sudden, instead of me being by myself and them being by themselves, we can be a team together. And then we can look for a new person, and then we can look for a new person. The other thing that happens with teachers is they've got to be able to teach their principal. Everything I do, there's no power in it. You know, if you've read all my books, they're all the same thing, and I know you'll feel blessed if anybody in the audience has just ordered 2. But what they really are is how you get people to do what it is you want them to do. And the best teachers, what's weird is they can get teachers to do it. I think of Georgia Humphreys, my single best teacher. Georgia Humphreys had the ability to come up and tell you you smell bad, and she could do it in a way you'd thank her, run home and take a shower, and immediately come up to her when you're done and going, hey, Georgia, how are you doing today? Because you know she'd tell you if you didn't smell better. Those of you who are in the audience who have children, do you expect your children to fix their friends? Or do you expect your children to do what's right even when their friends do wrong? And think about what a high standard that is. So the first thing that teacher can do is do what's right all the time, every day. Because think about this. When a new teacher joins a school, they go to the first faculty meeting. Do you know they expect it to be exciting? They expect it to be engaging. They expect to learn. And what happens is, whenever it isn't like that, or teachers are critical or are mean-spirited or whatever, the new teachers are looking around and they're thinking, this is weird. Doesn't anybody else think this is weird? And you know what they need is somebody else who thinks it's weird. They need somebody else who thinks this is wrong to talk to people like this. Think about this. How many of you who are in an elementary school work with at least a couple teachers that cannot wait to tell next year's teachers about their kids they're going to get? And you understand that teacher's rooting against you, don't you? And what's scary is they're rooting against the kids. That's what's so scary to me, is they're rooting against the students. And never discount that. Never understand. And so that teacher, if a teacher can do what's right every day, all the time, they can find other people who want to do what's right every day, all the time. It's really got to come from the principal, but if I'm a teacher, all I can do is do what's right myself.
Thank you. I think Dan's got another question here from the audience, Todd.
I sure do. Just a second here. This next one comes from Derek Hatch, and his question is, what is the most important skill that we can teach our students?
Wow. I think if there was just one, it'd probably shorten the standardized tests a lot. And so I don't know that there's one. The most valuable gift we can give our students is confidence. We treat every student with respect and dignity every single day. We come to work in a positive attitude every single day. We're the filter for what comes in and what doesn't. When people say, how's your day going, you have to say great. And the reason you say great is because it doesn't help you not to. And it's just setting that tone every single day. When kids come to class, do we smile, look them in the eye, and greet them? Are we not there? Do we not smile? Do we act rude? Do we tell them to sit down? How do we start that tone? And the challenge isn't doing this when we're happy and perky the first week of school. The challenge is doing this at the beginning of March when we're whipped. But the great teachers do it, the crummy teachers don't, and everybody else falls somewhere in between. Crummy teachers hardly ever do it, great teachers always do it, and so everybody else falls somewhere in between. And you have to decide where are you at in terms of that falling somewhere in between. I'd go in Georgia Humphrey's classroom and write her a little note that said, Georgia, I was sitting in my office and I forgot what school was. And I came into your room for 2 minutes and I remembered what school was. Thanks for being here for me. Thanks for being here for our students. The teacher can do that exact same thing. What happens is, if you think about this, you don't ever you seldom hear the voices of support. I'm always scared to talk about things that are political or anything. Bobby Knight, I moved to Indiana, and Bobby Knight was kind of near the end of his reign here, and he kind of lost credibility in general. The president, and people can talk about Bobby Knight, whatever, I don't even care. I don't even have an opinion. But Bobby Knight got fired by the president, and what's interesting is you do know 90% of the people agreed with the president, but nobody can go out and protest for something. And so I think that private acknowledgement that you've done the right thing, this is the right thing. You know what's interesting? If you're that great teacher, there's a whole bunch of people that are supportive of you. There's a whole bunch of people that think you did the right thing. You're doing it. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're the principal. I'm so glad you're here. That's what you can do. You can support anybody that way. Stroke people. A well-placed compliment has incredible power.
Great. Devin, Dan?
Got another question for you. This comes from Brad Curry, and he promised to keep his shirt on. And he asked, what do connected educators do differently?
Well, you really need to ask my co-authors because they're kind of the brains behind this whole deal, let me tell you. But I think the thing that's important about connected educators, and this was part of the I didn't have very many things to negotiate out with my co-authors who are smarter than me. But the one thing I wanted to make sure is connected can mean connected anywhere, anytime. And an individual school, connected educators, I think that, and this is something as a principal, I think that principals should be doing everywhere and schools should be doing. We have to get teachers in each other's classroom in a non-judgmental, non-evaluative way. If every teacher goes in every room, what happens is all the teachers become like the best teachers, as long as it's a non-judgmental, non-evaluative way. You know what? You become connected that way within your school. When you think of outside your school, you could connect through Pinterest, through Facebook, through Twitter, through Voxer, through all these different things. And what the first thing that Twitter does, it allows great people to find each other. For example, Dan, you're the one that asked this. I know somebody asked this question, but I'm asking you. How many sections do you have? You have 2 different schools, I believe. How many sections do you have at a grade level?
2.
2, okay. There's a chance in some of your grade levels, both the teachers are not happy, perky, upbeat, and risk takers. But if you have one that is, and that other person isn't, do you see how alone we feel? Iowa schools, I worked in Missouri, we had 120 kids at Hopkins, grades 5 through 12. You know, I had one band teacher, one art teacher, one math teacher, those people are lonely. And especially if they're caring, and that connected educator can help you find other people who also care and try like that. I'll give you the silliest example, and I use it when I present, but it's a true one. April 15th, as you all remember, 2012 was the 100th anniversary of the Titanic. Probably about a month before that anniversary, I saw a tweet that came out and said, yeah, I teach 5th grade, And my kids are so excited about the Titanic. I put together an interdisciplinary unit linking math, science, social studies, language arts, and reading. And I didn't know if anybody else might want to use this, or if anybody has any feedback on how to improve it. I'd really appreciate it. Half hour later, I see on Twitter, yeah, I teach high school physics, and I put together a unit on the Titanic. And here's some of the things we're doing using the physics properties, and we've linked this together. Yeah, we're a middle school, and we put together an interdisciplinary unit at the 7th grade linking math, science, social studies, and language arts. And we've done this related to the Titanic. That's connected. You know, it's funny. I have 2 daughters that are both teachers. One's a 3rd-year math teacher in Kansas City, flips all her classrooms. You know what she does on Twitter every day? Puts her lessons, tweets her lessons with a YouTube link with her teaching in a flipped classroom in her math classes. And you know what she's found? Other teachers who do the same thing. And in a school, which teachers are typically the first ones to do these things? It's the best teachers. You know why you want to be on Twitter? So you can steal ideas from the best teacher. Did you know we cannot learn how to be great from average people, because average people do not know how to be great? Nobody keeps it a secret. They do not know how to be great. You got to find other great people and just steal ideas from them. It can also be reinforcing to you. Other people are doing this. Other people have the challenge. You know, I mentioned, this is funny, New Teacher Chat, which is on Wednesday night, absolutely phenomenal, MTCHAT, as you all know. Some people think it's the second best one besides IAEDCHAT in the country. But, you know, they say the margin between first and second is wide, but they say second is clearly that one. Anyhow, what's interesting is I saw a tweet 2 years ago in May that said, from a first-year teacher that said, colleagues, I don't want to hear about the kids I'm going to have next year, because they didn't have me this year. Do you see how empowering that is? Just to hear another voice like that where you're going, that's right. I don't need to listen to them. I don't have to do that. And to be able to have the strength to do it. So I think it's share ideas, steal ideas, borrow ideas, connect with Yoko Ono, do anything you can. And those are evident. Those are things that you try to do on Twitter. I think that, you know, one of the things I talk to my own 3 children about all the time, a follower is never going to cure cancer. And I don't know about any of you, but I'd like somebody to come up with that one. But it's never going to be a follower. We didn't get into education to have people follow. We didn't get into education to have limited minds and try to restrict what it is they're doing. We got into education to try to have people do great things, different things. And if the adults in a school don't do it, there's no way the students in the school are going to do it. And if the principal doesn't do it, the teachers are going to be scared of their own shadow.
What are some of the most important standards for principals to hold high for their staff?
Yeah. I think that we treat every single person with respect and dignity every single day, no matter what our mood is, no matter what time of year it is, no matter how challenging the class is, no matter what our class size, no matter how we're feeling, no matter what the weather, no matter what the last vacation, no matter what the next vacation is. That's the #1 thing we do all the time. We treat every single person with respect and dignity every single day. We lay that as an expectation, and more important, we modeled it. I told you when I was 25, I went in classrooms every single day. I'm not very smart. You know why I went in classrooms? So the teacher saw how you treat the kids. You know why I get on the school buses when the bus drivers pull in? So the bus drivers see how you talk to the kids. So the bus drivers see how you treat the kids. I don't know how they're going to figure it out if we don't model it. Because what happens is many times our only model is, first of all, we're alone. It's an isolated profession. We're in a room. But we hear our one buddy next to us who may be yelling or belittling or berating the kids. And you know what? They don't know another way. You know, it's really funny. My daughter Madeline, who I think's watching this, Madeline student taught in Nashville, Tennessee, and had a very, very challenging student-teacher situation when she was a student teacher. Madeline, the first week, called me and goes, Dad, I grew up in your home with you and Mom. With this student teacher, I almost yelled the third day when she was a student teacher. You know why? Because that's what the teacher thought was right or wrong. And how many of us have taught with teachers who are just average? How many principals give assignments for mentoring and student teachers on a rotational basis? It's this person's grade level or this person's turn or this. Why would we ever do that? And we've got to teach our teachers this. If I had a teacher who would go, this isn't new news, they've heard it 100 times, but if I had a teacher who would go, Todd, how come I don't ever get a student teacher? I'd have to go, I cannot give a student teacher to any teacher who sits behind their desk that much, who uses that many worksheets or ever talks to that students in that tone and manner, because I could never allow a teacher to think that's the way they're supposed to be. because that would send them on the wrong road for their entire profession. And if I can't have that conversation with a teacher, you tell me I'm going to have tough conversations. That's not even hard. But how many principals are not willing to do that? Thus, we get caught into a mediocrity level there. So I think it's that. The first faculty meeting of the year, I talk about we don't argue, we don't yell, we don't use sarcasm. The first faculty meeting of the year, I teach my teachers, and I give them exact language when they call parents. What do you say if a parent's mad? What do you say if a parent's upset? What do you say if a parent says, my child never lies to me? How do you deliver bad news? How do you deliver good news? Why would I ever want a new teacher to make a phone call to a parent without knowing what to say to that parent? Because if it goes bad, that new teacher's lost confidence. And then what happens is they're going in the teacher's lounge, and you know what the two worst teachers are saying? Told you not to call parents. I told you the parents are out to get you. And that new teacher then becomes like them. And when you hire a new teacher, your only goal is to have your school become more like your new teachers, not to have your new teachers become like your school. So if that makes any sense, and you got to teach people this, but you got to live it every day, but you got to teach them also. Modeling is not enough, because in every school you got good models and bad models, and average people don't know which ones they're supposed to follow. So you got to teach them. Teach them all the time, everything you're doing. There's such a difference between establishing expectations and correcting behaviors. And the thing that's interesting, if you just think of your high achievers want to know what the rules of the game are before the game ever starts. Because if they know it, they'll always follow them. And think about this. Dan, if you're a brand new principal, and you could be your second school, but if you're new into a school and you walk in the door, did you know when you walk into the door of a school, the secretary wants to know how you want them to answer the phone? Does that make any sense? They want to know how you want them to answer the phone until they answer the phone. Because once they answer the phone, now they don't want to know how you want them to answer the phone because you're correcting their behavior. And if you have a really high-achieving secretary, they want to please you. You walk in and you say, you know, would you ever mind answering the phone like this? I'm just picky about this, and I'm sorry to be so annoying, and I wrote it out on index cards because I thought if there's a sub-secretary, that way we could all answer it the same. Would you mind doing that? That great secretary would love that. Wait a week and then bring it up, and you know what? They're ashamed, and you've hurt your relationship, and they'll never forget that you're correcting them in terms of that.
Got time for one more question, then we'll have to wrap up here tonight. But we've gotten a few questions about PLCs, how to get teams to function more smoothly, more productively, work more collaboratively. I can't wait to hear your response on this one.
Jimmy, I don't even have a response. You know, one thing is programs are never the problem, programs are never the solution. People are always the problem, people are always the solution. With PLCs, you got to teach people from the very beginning, what are they for? How do we do it? How do we communicate? How do we interact? If not, what happens? We get in a PLC and we whine about Johnny Tucker. And the two teachers that were in a good mood are now in a bad mood because they don't even have Johnny Tucker, but they're tired of them whining about Johnny Tucker. So to think, I always say anything that uses initials is going to be gone in 10 years, so always keep that in mind. But what happens is in high-functioning schools, there's always been opportunities for relationships, for communication, but we have to help people understand how to do this. Think about teachers going in each other's classrooms. Do I want them just walking in rooms with no guidance on how we communicate, how we interact? What happens if you do that? Your first-year teacher, a veteran teacher who doesn't like them because they're prettier than them and get along better, they're going to go in the room and go, your class seemed pretty good, but is it me or do you look puffy? And what's happened is you've just allowed that to happen because you've never set up any ways on how we communicate, how we establish this. So, you know, the number one word with PLCs typically is frustrating. But I think in high-functioning schools with high-functioning leaders, there's always been something like PLCs. And in ineffective schools, then they're just never going to work. And it's really, how do I teach people? And in addition, do I put thought into, in every PLC, are the good guys in charge? And I don't mean formally in charge, but you can have a meeting in which you walk in the room and you're going, oh no. Because you know that the dominant personalities are the strong negative personalities, and you know they're going to control this meeting. And it can be a PLC or anything else. You can have another one where you know the good, and you have to put thought into that. In a great principal's classroom, in a great teacher's classroom, nothing ever happens randomly. In a great principal's school, nothing ever happens randomly.